CBS News correspondent Byron Pitts came to Fairfield University to speak to the Open Visions Forum. I got a chance to sit down with Byron before he spoke to the students. Okay. Byron, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the coverage of Egypt. There's actually, in the last couple of days, there's been a lot of talk about it, and I wanted to get your thoughts on the idea of journalists kind of becoming the story and what your take is on that.
Well, I think it's always dangerous if journalists, in fact, become the story, because that's not our job, and we're there to cover the event, not be a part of the event. But certainly in this age of 24-hour news cycles and the need to kind of fill that void, also there's something to be said for showing people what happens on the ground, the low-angle view, if you will. And I think, you know, having a Western journalist get knocked in the head and they're able to illustrate that can allow the viewer to see, to understand how dangerous it is. If it's that dangerous for journalists, imagine how dangerous it must be for the people who live there day to day. But I'm always leery of that kind of reporting because, again, it ain't about us. Right. It's about the people that we're there to cover.
And there's also kind of been some talk about this idea that journalists today have been sort of using their pulpit or their channels for pro-democracy views, specifically trying to create, you know, in all the upheavals right now. So I want to get your take on if you think it's acceptable for journalists to kind of be promoting democracy as sort of journalism as advocacy.
No. I think the job of a journalist is to find the truth and report it. I'm a believer of the old saying that it's my job as a journalist to give voice to the voiceless, to, if possible, afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. That's journalism. I think what you have now in this day and age of cable television and one side purporting to represent the right, the other side, another side presenting, suggesting they represent the left. I don't call that either one of those things journalism. Journalism, you know, I'm from the Edward R. Murrow School of Journalism, that you sort of go there, you witness events, you tell what happened as accurately as you know how. One of the great things about this democracy, our country, is that Americans have always proven that if you give them information, that we as a nation, Americans, can make their own choice. They don't need someone like me telling them what they should think or what's right, what's wrong.
So what story right now isn't being reported on that you think really should be reported on?
That's a great question. I think I think certainly we could do more stories about education in this country. That matters a great deal. We only talk about it in instances like what's happening in Wisconsin right now with the debate over the budget, and it's primarily, the story is primarily being reported about the budget. But I think most people, you know, I'm a parent. Most parents are concerned how they're going to educate their children, the incredible cost of education. I think so often when young people appear on television, most often they're doing something wrong. But most young people I know are good and decent and work hard and obey their parents and have their own dreams. So I think stories about education, stories about young people, stories that also reflect the diversity of America. I mean, too often I think when you watch mainstream media in this country, white men are allowed to be experts on every subject under the sun and even perpetrators of crime. Women are portrayed in a more narrow way. Minorities even more narrow way. When I worked in local television in Boston, in Massachusetts, your home state, there was a terrible snowstorm back in the early 90s, one of the record snowstorms in Massachusetts. And in looking at the week of coverage at the station I worked at and our main competitors, not once did an Asian American appear on the air. So I guess the suggestion was the snowstorm didn't impact Asian Americans. And it didn't impact many African Americans and other groups, many Latinos. So I would think there's always concern about the dwindling audience in television in particular. I think part of that is that television day to day doesn't necessarily reflect the world we live in.
Do you think that the two wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, are getting enough coverage?
No, not right now. I think certainly early on it did. I understand there are probably some economic reasons why it isn't reported more often, because it's incredibly expensive to do business in that part of the world. And at some level, television, newspapers, radio, they all operate as a business. And also, it's incredibly dangerous to be in that part of the world. I mean, I've lost friends and colleagues in both places. I've had a friend lose a limb in that part of the world. So it's dangerous, it's expensive, but those of us who are committed to journalism believe that story should be covered more.
Now I'm going to switch gears completely and talk about Lindsay Lohan and Charlie Sheen. So Lindsay Lohan, court cases, we hear about it all the time.
Can you give me a smoother transition? You just kind of went there.
Charlie Sheen, I mean, he's in rehab, and basically we hear this on the news almost nightly. There's almost nightly updates about these people, and I wanted to get your thoughts on, the role of journalism in covering these people, and whether you think it's actually something that Americans should be hearing about nightly is, Lindsay Lohan and Charlie Sheen.
Right. Well, on the one hand, as a journalist, as an American citizen, I believe that information is a good thing. And that one of the things that separates us from other parts of the world is that American citizens have the right to have access to information, and hopefully that information is accurate. For me personally, that's not the kind of journalism I went to school to do that I care much about. I care about the two people you mentioned because I'm a human being, and you want people to live good and productive lives. The Charlie Sheen story is potentially interesting, I think, as a journalist because of what it says about issues around addiction that many families struggle with outside of the spotlight of celebrity. But keeping up with those kinds of people, that isn't the kind of journalism that I'm into. God bless the folks who do it. I hear it pays pretty good, but it's not the kind of journalism that I want to be about. And
finally, I saw on your Facebook page that you're into Bikram Yoga.
I am. I love Bikram.
How did that start?
I started Bikram about, you did your homework, very nice. I started Bikram probably about 6-8 years ago, I think, maybe longer. Just because of the kinds of work that I do and the places that I go, it's still important at my advanced age of 50 to, they're laughing as if that's really old. Trust me, live long enough, you too someday will be 50. It's important to be as physically fit as possible, to go places like Iraq and Afghanistan. It's a great workout. It's a time in which, for me, life kind of slows down. I do other things, but as I get older, it gets harder to go to the gym and lift weights and, run. Bikram Yoga I can do.
Have you ever been to a hotter place besides the Bikram Yoga studio?
Oh, sure. I was in Afghanistan once, and I was in Iraq once, and it was 130 degrees outside. So that was hot. So I always tell my colleagues who complain we're in difficult places or it's hot, like, you ain't seen hot.